So with that, I leave it with you, Jeff.
Thank you. How many of you have ever seen the television program Mythbusters? Anybody watch that? Oh, I love it. Yeah, you know, Adam and Jamie, and they're figuring out if if somebody really was in the Bourne Identity and they ran their car off the parking lot ramp where they really live. So about 25 years ago, I had a Mythbuster conversation with the wrong person. I had a Mythbuster conversation with the man who's the head of the Nobel Prize Committee for Economics. And the question he asked me was, does innovation really pay in big companies? And my answer was, I think so. And he said, well, you know, that ought to be a good area of research, Jeff. And so what followed was what I thought would be about a month or two worth of work. And it turned out to take about 7 or 8 years, and doctoral students, and a guy who's now the head of NASA, and a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't expect to have happened. But here was kind of the upshot. When we started looking at the major indexes of innovation, and at the time there was about 10, and now there's like a bazillion of them, one of the things that we discovered is in the 17 years that we studied them and compared them to the Russell 2500, the growth index that's used on Wall Street, out of all those 17 years, the only time that another index ever won was twice. Meaning, you have a 1 in 10 chance of innovating. If your key indicators are accurate, 1 in 10. In fact, if you look at all the shots on goal, there were 170 shots on goal and only 2 went in. Less than 1%. Oh, I know, we're all innovators. Here, I'm telling you the great news, right? I'm starting with all the happy news. Innovation doesn't pay. Then we started looking at, well, let's take this apart. Let's deconstruct this, because there are different kinds of portfolios, small cap, large cap. There's different regions you trade in. There's different markets. Do you throw out financial services? How do you weight the portfolio? How about risk management? There's a whole bunch of issues you have to master around that. And what was interesting was the data got even worse when we compared apples to apples. Oh, I'm full of good news, right? You're going to go drinking after this, right? You're going to need it. So, yeah. So why is innovation different? So when we started to peel the onion, here's what we found. So I'm going to deconstruct why what you believe about innovation is wrong, and then I'm going to reconstruct it, a way to think about this differently so you do beat the Russell 2500. It turns out that one of the problems with innovation is it's simply a form of useful novelty. It can happen anywhere. It can happen in a place like Starbucks where you have a commodity. It can happen in the supply chain. It can happen in how you sell something. So the real issue is where in fact is innovation, and what in fact do we mean by innovation? Do we mean a hard lumpy object? Do we mean how much revenue we make? Do we mean that it's cool? Right? What do we mean by that? Second thing, breakthrough innovations happen in the future, for which we have no data. I'm flying 100 late yesterday from Ann Arbor, and the lady sitting next to me says the dollar going to go up or down. And I said, it's going to go down. And she said, oh really? Why do you know that? And I said, that's what currencies do. They go up and down. Duh. Did you go to school? Maybe she went to Ohio State. I don't know. Oh, I had to get it in there. Come on, we're in Chicago, right? And she said, when? And I said, if I knew when, I'd be George Soros. I'd be speculating the dollar, and I sure as hell wouldn't be telling a pathetic loser like you. I know what was going to go up and down. We have no data on the future, and what organizations do, they get stuck in the planning cycle. How many have been to the meeting about the meeting? The report about the report, you know what I'm talking about, right? Finally, innovation has a shelf life. It goes sour like milk. I was out here in the fall for the American Medical Association. What was interesting was there was a big line around their building. I thought it was the AMA. It was the new iPhone 7S. Right? What happens to the 7S when the 8 comes out? It's rubbish. So it's not an innovation for very long. So we've got this big problem that no one else has. The people in this room have this problem. Well, let's keep peeling that onion. That creates other problems. So the first problem is, what do we mean by innovation? What exactly is it? Right? The marketing person thinks it's sales, the finance person thinks it's money, the engineering person thinks it's tech. There are diversity approaches to innovation. The way you make an airplane and the way you start a new restaurant has nothing in common. In fact, as a great test, go back and look at all the big surveys about innovation and ask yourself a simple question. Why aren't the same companies in the survey? And the answer is simple. What's different between these companies and the rest of the Fortune 2500? And the answer is they have nothing in common. So there's only two things going on. Either innovation is highly situational, which it is, and the second thing is they're not talking about the same thing. How many are going through that in their organization? When people talk about innovation, they're not, oh come on, you're deniers here. Of course they are. You're too far in the back office if you believe otherwise, right? Unknown disruptions, event-driven innovations, right? One of the things I love is people look at innovation like it's nice and continuous. I was an advisor in 06 to the Federal Reserve. When I looked at my innovation index, what I noticed was all the dials went the wrong way. I didn't know what we were looking at, but what I knew was it wasn't normal. This is not normal. Was your strategy any good after September 27th on 2007? It was probably rubbish, because the event when the market corrected was so absolutely unbelievably large, you have to go back to the panic of 1893 to see anything like it. Right? So the notion is that changes everything. Finally, what is the exact relationship between your current practices and the outcomes you get? How does it all go together? Well, let's peel the onion even farther. When you look at innovation measures, and you look at innovation indexes, they have something in common. One, some use input measures, but the problem with that is there's too much variety and we don't really know what the outputs are because we don't have data on the future. Some use output measures, but the problem with output measures is they're always looking historically. They're lagging measures. They're not leading measures. And they don't predict the inputs that create them. The inputs that create them are soft issues like talent and opportunity and marketing. They don't predict them. Survey data, this is my favorite. They talk about current trends, right? They don't talk about the future. And finally, the biggest thing about surveys is they define the inputs. They don't tell you anything about the outputs. They don't tell you what kind of value these are going to create. And finally, we look at things like patents applied for. You should know by now all patents are not equal. Some patents are simply garbage. They don't tell you a lot. Some patents are game changers, and we live in a post-patent economy. So we've got problems with this. Oh, I'm full of good news. What it comes down to is a fundamental thing that took us a lot of digging to find. There are two things working against each other in innovation. The first thing is what is called concavity. This is the quarterly report you give your shareholders. This is predictable, incremental forms of innovation. This is going to produce that. Incidentally, this is why all the major firms on Wall Street hate Apple. Now you'd say, well, Apple's performed well, $758 billion of cap value. But it's unpredictable. And this is what makes them mad. They're trying to run a predictive portfolio. Now the second end of the portfolio is what? It's the venture capitalist end of the portfolio. It's the uncertain part of the portfolio. And this is something we call convexity. It pays in the future. But the real questions are what? When exactly in the future does it pay? What is the innovation premium? What is the multiplier on this? These things are not simpatico. They actually are not differences in type or style. One form of innovation destroys the other, and I'm going to prove it to you. So we had a revelation when we were doing this, and this was really led by a very pretty graduate student who I eventually married because she's way smarter than me, and that's what you do when you meet people who are way better than you are, you marry them, right? So I did that. So this is really her work from somebody much smarter than I am. So basically what we did was we combed out all the different value propositions. Yes, don't try this at home, right? These days you get in trouble for that sort of thing. But back in the day we did, right? So, what we did was we broke down 160 variables into 8 variables, 8 different value propositions, and here was the key. When we started looking at these value propositions individually, we didn't have a lot of luck. When we started looking at convex and concave as pairs, together, conflicting, all of a sudden, the light went on, right? And since 2000 to 2017, looking at the Russell 2500, we have beaten it all but 6 years. Meaning we have a 70%, and if you consider the 1% versus 70%, we've actually gotten something right. So I'm going to take you through how we did this. I'm going to take you through how you can do it, because we want to make this sort of eye level. Enough of the macroeconomics lesson here. But it comes down to this. All of us have a dominant worldview. One of the men who brought me to Michigan was probably the most famous innovation strategist of the 20th century, C.K. Prahalad. And C.K. famously said that we have blinders on. If you want to know what dominant logic is, talk to anybody you know about religion or politics, and you'll quickly see what they cannot see, because they can't see anything else. They're so combined, and they're so bound in by their dominant logic. So we're going to have to get beyond our dominant logic, and some of you have seen this model before. Yes, I'm the third researcher on this model. It's often referred to as the innovation genome, the innovation code, the competing values framework, whatever you want to call it, Quinn, Cameron, and DeGraff, right? So here's the point. The point is, at the beginning, we're going to see a form of value that's what we're going to call the forward position. It's radical. I want you to think about our friends at the Large Hadron Collider, who 3 years ago discovered the bows, right, in Switzerland. Did anybody remember the story about the problem? 7 Nobel Prize winners, 2 of them thought it would create a black fissure and destroy the universe as we know it. They bet a beer and pulled the switch. See you in hell, Jurgen, right? These are these people. Who let the Greens touch the switch? Radical innovators with radical risks, forward position players, highly divergent, diverse, speculating, VCs, Jobs when he's young. The opposite of that is the control position. The control position, these are the control freaks. You gotta kiss their ring, genuflect. You know, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. You know, the meeting has a long table in it. These are innovators that are incremental but at scale. They're working to optimize. Now I want to point something out to you that's very important. This is not about style. I want you to think about quality, which is the reduction of errors. And I want you to think about breakthrough innovation, which is the introduction of variation. These are not style issues. One is the opposite of the other. This is a bar fight. Now, in most people's language, this bar fight is negative. But in innovation, if it's constructive, it's the most powerful force you have because it's generative, right? We want radical at scale. We had Amazon talk here. We've got Microsoft here, right? We can be big. You have a predatory advantage. You have more products and services to combine in a small firm. You face more markets. You're higher situated in the value chain. How are you letting a small firm pound the stuffing out of you? Look at pharmaceuticals. It's a great example, right? 20,000 drug discovery people, Nobel Prize winners. How are they losing to biotechs? It's because they're eschewing constructive conflict. They're trying to align everything because the only thing more important to a firm than growing is maintaining its equilibrium, quarterly shareholder earnings. So number one, we're going to try and create this tension, right? We're going to try and replicate what pays. The second tension is to compete. These are MBAs, these are Michigan guys, University of Chicago people, guys up north is everybody, women, we're all guys, right? Shoes and haircuts people, they don't care whether it's tangerines or aerospace, they're all about making money. They hunt like hounds, they're very, very fast, they compete for everything. Some of you are my age, you look like boomers. Boomers, we competed for everything, didn't we, damn it? Now, everybody gets a ribbon. How many, that makes you insane. If you're, no! I was an All-American wrestler. I got the ribbon, the rest you go drinking and go to therapy. That's how it works. Kicked your ass, right? That's how it works. But our kids, our millennials, our collaborators, you know, kumbaya, young people. They want values and sustainability, save the whales, and we care about everyone in the human community. And this is true not only of culture. Microsoft killed all of her enemies. She did. She was the biggest white shark in her end of the ocean. Until somebody said, software should be free, man. And that's hard. It wasn't Apple that drove them crazy. It was the hippies here. Get a job. Short-term performance, long-term development. These are the two things you're going to have to look at. This is a simple external, internal flexibility, stability. The point I'm trying to make is this happens at all levels. It happens in nation states. It happens in companies. It happens between divisions. This is a math. This is a cosmology because innovation is the result of constructive conflict. It does not happen when everyone's happy. It's not puppies and sunshine. What do you say? Unicorns and rainbows. It's not unicorns and rainbows. So the first question you have to ask yourself is how much innovation, and the second question is how fast. Magnitude and momentum. If you can answer those two questions, you can actually create value. How much and how fast? And if the answer is I want all of the above, it's like everything else in life, you will get nothing. Right? It's all about making choices. Would you rather be handsome and rich or live forever? I don't know. That's the choice, right? That's why it's a choice. So this happens at three levels. It happens at the situational or the strategic level. Is there a war going on? Is there a pandemic going on? Is there a whole change in the way people do things? Here's a good one that you probably have all missed. Your children, millennials, 3 facts you should know. Number 1, they don't marry. Over half of all live births to women under the age of 30 since 2014 are outside of marriage. Marriage is no longer the majority for young people. Number 2, when we ask young people what they want to do for a living, guess what they want to do? They don't want to work for you. They want to save the whales and hike in the outback for 3 months and work at TechWorks kind of and be an Uber driver at night and, you know, I'm in the theater over here. Okay. And 3, when we ask them what religion they belong to, the fast-growing religion of people under the age of 30 is atheism. Your young people have opted out of institutionality. The very institutions that held my generation together are separating that generation. So the notion is if you think the whole play that you've run before is going to work on this next generation, good luck to you. You're going to need all the luck you can get. Organizationally, it's different. And finally, individual. We're going to talk about individuals a lot because that's something that we can deal with. So let's talk about these 3 levels. The first level is the level of the situation. The 4th position, greens, are particularly good when the situation is highly unique. So this is not Myers-Briggs. You don't get to be you. It's about what's appropriate given what's going on here. I need to be here and INFJ. Great, thank you for telling me that. Your horoscope as well. Miracle drugs, visual prosthetics, things that are radical. These are, seeing, people using computers to help people see differentiation. Craft beers, haute couture fashion. These are unique situations where the more differentiated you are, the better off you're going to be, the more the value proposition is. Number 2, these are called adhocracies. Adhocracies are where radical innovation or breakthrough innovation happens, and we see things like discovery-based strategy and radical experiments. It's also where organic growth happens, new market speculation, and greenhouse funds. And finally, at the individual level, this is the artist, aesthetic vision, artistic expression. Just look out here at these young people, right? They're all about discovering their spiritual self, their psychological self. The magnitude of innovation is high, the momentum is medium, the risk is high. These things blow up a lot really well. That blew up real good, didn't it, Glenn? Yeah, that blew up good, right? This is this group. So, artists, if you want constructive conflict, go engage your opposite. And the opposite is the engineer. And the engineer knows the right way and the wrong way, and knows you didn't go to the right school, and knows you weren't certified in that technique. That's like drunk driving. You got to go back. So learn to love the gathering data and reading the fine print and prioritizing and going to the meeting with the long table and showing up on time and all the things that artists hate to do. And you think they never notice, artists, but they got a file on you like J. Edgar Hoover. And on a dark night on a dark road, we'll never hear from you again. These are the reds. So greens embrace the reds, even though they made you crazy. Reds. Reds are control situations, are all about predictability. Scalability. I'm going to get on the airline right after this. I want to make sure that air traffic control is not doing anything goofy. Right? Everything's going the right way. Heavy manufacturing. It's also where we have to be cautious. Surgical procedures, power generation. We don't want to kill anybody. Right? This is really where that's not an option. We're always going to see scalability here. Failure is not an option, and complexity. Right? So these are going to be the Boeings of the world. Right? Hierarchy, this is why we have to have efficiency, right? It is better to measure twice and cut once. This is where we're going to see quality. Anybody who's got a 12-step process or more, you're a red, right? You've got, whether you're quitting drinking or you're going lean. These are these kind of tools. And don't be fooled. They'll say things like stage gating systems are a green tool. No, they're not. They're a red tool. They're a risk mitigating tool. Stage gating 101, right? Don't be fooled. And finally, these are our engineers, and I love engineers. It's all about safety and savings and productivity and putting your shoulder to the wheel, making sure we build the damn thing the right way. The magnitude is relatively low. They're incrementalists. The momentum is relatively medium, but they won't drive the Harley into the pool tonight, if you know what I mean. They're the risk-free group. Yeah, so this is risk-free. Now, engineers. If you want to create constructive conflict, you're going to learn that you got to let your hair down. Yeah, you got to go to a Grateful Dead concert, or Fish, or, okay, put on the white dress, have a few too many mushrooms, dance in the hallway, finger painting, I don't know what it means. Just go with it. It's improv, right? talk to weird people. You know, the guy in the park with aluminum foil thinks that the socialist is scrambling his brains. Put him on your team, because maybe the socialist scrambling his brains knows something. You don't know. So enjoy the revolution. So number one, two people need to know each other because the opposites create this positive tension. This fella here was one of my students at Michigan, right? Created this little company with this fella here, and they created this little company called Google, right? One of them, wild-eyed pistol waver, the other one's sort of a mathematician, kind of a hardcore, you know, quant, and together they become this interesting group. Or if you'd like, a better example might be Lennon and McCartney. You know, you start looking at these pairs and you start going, this is going to happen over and over and over again. We start looking at these people highly successful. So I'm trying to make this at a very sort of high level for everybody here. Now let's turn to blues, MBAs, Michigan MBAs. Right, this is, you know, Chicago and Wharton, punch in the teeth, right, those guys. Right? Contentious, they're aggressive. You know, smartphones, snack foods, who's going to get there first? They're super aggressive. And they're really demanding situations, right? Financial services, college football, right? That's a big thing. Who's going to beat who? There's always a winner and loser in these situations. These are kind of your combat troops, your Delta forces. These are grinders, right? These are people who keep the enemy at the gate, right? Right? Those situations, they're market-based, so they're all about speed and profitability. You made a great point earlier about time to market. These are sprinters. They're not very sustainable, but they're sprinters. So this is not a sustainable point of view, but they're very profitable. And finally, these are the athletes. They're all about vitality and prosperity. You know these people. You see them even at these kind of events. We were staying over at Palmer, and people are getting up early, and they got their leotards on, and they're running, and they're doing their phone stuff, and they're making power calls, and they're saying their affirmations about how they're going to kill the other guy, and never let it slow, it's on the base, and yeah, those guys. But they're only moderate innovators. They're not radicals. And they're very, very fast, and the downside is they're the least sustainable group here. The delta on these stocks is very high. Right? We've got a few companies in here that the delta on your stock is very high. This is why. Because you live quarter to quarter. We know how you're going to make a quarter. We don't know what happens after that. These are typically revenue stocks. How athletes can engage the sages. Now, this is the hardest one of anybody in this group. And incidentally, there's a link, so you can take this assessment online. It's the largest innovation assessment in the world. I think 42,000 people took it last year. It's free. Here's the thing. Blues hate this. So blues, try and mediate or resolve a conflict in a nice way. Right? Blues, incidentally, don't touch the blues. Even though the blues are trying, they have low EQ. Don't touch them. They'll pull a knife or get a hotel room, one or the other. Don't touch the blues. You can talk to the blues. Don't touch the blues. Right? Celebrate someone else's success. You know, yeah, you can do it. And just under your breath or in your own mind say, yeah, but you totally suck. No, you got to get beyond this. So blues, learn to be huggy people, learn to reward people, learn that everyone should get a medal, learn that. And embrace your inner yellow. Right? These are boomers. And incidentally, this millennials, if you want to know what our problem with you is, it's this. This is our problem with you. Because we didn't do this. We don't do that, and we need to learn to do that. That's part of our challenge. And finally, collaborate. So this is about situations that are highly cooperative, like belief systems. You know, we should have bicycle lanes, and everybody should get health care and have an education. And the lifestyle stuff, you know, that we're gaming together. You know, the whole idea for somebody like me to get online at, 11 o'clock and play a game is just insane. I'm like, really, why would I do that, right? Do I owe you money or something? What's going on here? They're very clannish. It's like the mafia. You know, if you've ever belonged to a PTA group, which is the local version of a mafia, right? And they're all about building community and building knowledge. And a lot of these new companies do that. And a lot of people are going, it doesn't pay. And some of these are really great companies, like Alibaba. I mean, Alibaba has a market size that's 3 times the size of Amazon, and it makes about 1/10 of the money, right? So the notion is, it doesn't mean that yours is some kind of a corner NGO. And finally, these are sages. These are all about capability and community. This is about developing people, so their magnitude is medium and their momentum is relatively slow, but this is the most sustainable group in the world. Now, of course, I'm dealing here in cartoon characters. No one is one or the other, but you can always tell what someone is by where they go under duress. Which direction do you move when you're under stress? That tells me whether you're right-handed or left-handed. It tells me what your firm does. In 2007, when all of these firms had trouble, it became very clear who you were, which direction you move. So, sages, become like athletes. First thing, be on time. When you commit to a number, hit the number, right? Remember that everything doesn't take a village to do. Some things you get in the room and you say, you're fired, you're hired, you move, so let it be written, so let it be done, right? These are things you always have to do, right? Confront your fears. This is the issue of how fast. Right? We talked about speed and magnitude. Do we go short-term performance unsustainable, long-term performance sustainable? Again, this tension is a good tension. It's not a bad tension as long as it's positive. Look at what's happening today in Washington, D.C., and you can see what destructive conflict looks like. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about constructive, holding these things together. Ben and Jerry, right? We got the yellow and the blue here. We're gonna make sure that we're only using fair trade cows or whatever it is they do. They're only eating Kobe grass or whatever. But they also made a little money when they sold the firm. Now I'm not going to spend any time on this, and this is in the materials that I have. There's actually a whole lot that can be done looking at socio-psychometric profiles of people. There's a whole worldview here. Right? So this isn't just sort of a superficial thing. What's important is that all of these worldviews have a problem. The first one is unrealistic vision for the artist, poor methodologies, total lack of discipline. Second one, professional expertise solves everything, scientific thinking, right way and wrong way. Overemphasis on competition, short-term focus, autocratic decision-making, groupthink, irrational enthusiasm, isolation from external pressure. Now here's an interesting one. How many of you have been married more than 10 years? How's that little change going for you? Ever have change anybody? No. So the point I'm making is, do you think you're going to change these people? No. Every strength brings a weakness. Right? So the notion is you've got to learn to deal with this stuff. What's the number one year for divorce? Year one. Because what do you learn in year one? Overwhelming. It's like 3 times the next year. What do you learn in year one? They're never going to change. I can't live with this. Right? That's what you learn. After year one, you kind of, you open, it's a little more open field. Like, oh, I think I can handle this. I think I'm going to be okay, right? So this is about having the right person at the right time in the right place. I'm a huge believer in talent. Finally, we've come to the age of talent. Right? We're going to have artificial intelligence, we're going to have big data, we're going to have virtual reality. We still have to make sense of things. We still have to find the incongruity. We're still going to have to take the shot. So the notion is we're going to have all those things in the future, but it's still going to be about talent, different kinds of talent for sure. Now, some things to think about. Some problems. The assumption that type equals competency is completely wrong. You can be a innovator and totally suck, right? You're not any good at it. You're that type, but you're not good. You're not developed. Assumption that talent can be developed. I love this one. Everybody writes about it. Show me one study that tells me I can produce Mozart or Einstein or anybody. Show me one. It can't. The notion is pick the team and put people in the right places. It doesn't mean that people aren't talented. We're just talented in different ways. Thank God for diversity. Assumption that all types are equal. They're not. If you're an investment bank, you better have a lot of blues. If you're an NGO, you better have a lot of yellows. In the forward position, when you start an experiment, you better have a lot of greens. In the aft position, you better get rid of the greens and have more reds. Right? Finally, the assumption that balance is better. No. You have to have the right team, the right approach, the right tools and methods. Now, why am I telling you this? Because overwhelmingly, to get to this number, we had to learn that leaders produce the culture and competency that largely produces the value outcome. That's the trade. But what we discovered in study after study after study is that leaders produce the culture and the competency that looks like them. And they produce the processes that look like them. And basically, in a very abstract way, a quarter of the time they produce value, a quarter of the time they destroy it, and half the time they don't have any impact on value. Meaning leaders, for the most part, don't really create any real value in the firm. So it's not about what type you are, and the bad type is not the opposite of you. The opposite of you is probably somebody you should find somebody who's highly capable who you like. And we talked about earlier, the way you find your real competency is where you move under pressure. And I made a little list here of some people, if you want to know who's where. One of my favorite Reds is Michael Bloomberg. Ever hear Michael Bloomberg talk? He's a tremendous man. I really love the guy. We got Jeff Bezos here. We were talking earlier about Jeff, an amazing visionary. I think one of the things that's amazing to me is what's happened at PepsiCo. I was kind of Coca-Cola's guy when Mary Minnick was there for a while. This is Indira Nooyi, who I think is a great example of a strong woman leader. And then finally, when we start thinking of yellow, I think of the new leadership model that's coming out of China. I spent a lot of time over the last 30 years in China and what Jack Ma is doing there. Same is true for countries. We start looking at the profiles of countries. America, how did we get to be America? Right? Was it nice? You came to America for 4 reasons. One, you came here to pursue Gold Mountain. You came to escape the Tsar. You came in chains, or in my case, we thought we were here. But apparently, no one else thought we mattered. So America is pretty ballistic, and we're going through that right now. When 2007 came, we laid off in 3 months 8.5 million people. That's the American way. But we came out of the recession faster. We own guns. Europeans, I know you don't understand it. It's just an American thing, right? It's kind of how we are. China, on the other hand, there are 54 words in Mandarin for which uncle are you. Are you the poor uncle that we should avoid? Are you the rich uncle that we need to suck up to? Which uncle are you? It's a clan-based society. I got a lot of giggles. Yes, true, isn't it? Right? You are. The Japanese, red, very red culture, right way, wrong way of doing things. The Dutch, very much a green culture. How can a country that small compete? You see a lot of new products and services, they're hitting above their weights. So this is also cultural, and it's not defined by nation state. These are just cultures that happen to fly over these. Which leads us to the most important thing I'm going to tell you today, which is how you innovate is what you innovate. How you innovate is what you innovate. So the biggest problem I see is somebody say, you know what I want? I want real radical growth. I want real crazy innovation. See, great, what are you going to do? I'm going to have a 12-step method. Everyone's going to be certified in methods. It's going to go trans, it's going to be trans, it's going to go step, method, and we're going to have radical innovation. No, you're not. You're going to have quality and efficiency, which are virtuous, true, and good, but you're going to accidentally strangle your forward position. How many have seen this happen in their firm? The devil we know is always better than the devil we don't. Look sheepishly at people like this. I hope no one's looking at me. Yes. I can see you. They don't have to see you. So here are the 3 problems you're going to run into and how to solve them. It's not within the quadrants that companies fail. It's in the handoffs. So greens, in the forward position. This is the GRC at General Electric. This is the IBM Palisade Center. These are these research centers. The problem is you're orphans. You invent incredible stuff, but it doesn't relate to anybody else. You're an orphan. So your problem is you need to take some blues and yellows and put them into your team, connecting them earlier into your team. And that's what our first speaker said today, didn't they? He said that was one of the big problems. The middling position, you have 2 problems between the blues and yellows. The first is these are oppositional forms of value, which means we have dogs and cats that have to get married here. And the second is this is the longest cycle of innovation. It's sometimes referred to as Death Valley or the bottom of the bathtub. And what it means is this is where you lose momentum. This is the gates of Harvard, that great quote from Dante, abandon all ye hope, ye who enter here. Meaning, when you get, how many been in that project? You know, it took 3 times longer, and you start getting the bends, and you think, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Finally, the aft position. The problem with the aft position is everything is optimized. They have to get scale. Every last supply chain nickel's been accounted for. Every operation has been accounted for from the first shift to the third shift. The notion is when you introduce variance, it basically creates all kinds of problems for optimization. Again, they need to put blues and yellows on that team. So the notion is I want you to think about it in steps. What you're trying to do is move from here to here, and at each time you want to have whoever is upstream and downstream of you represented. Doesn't mean that they have an equal vote. It just means they have to be represented so you have a line of sight. Now that leads us to another dynamic, which I think people get wrong all the time. It turns out, in innovation, the 80-20 rule is the worst rule you could ever adopt. It's the 20-80 rule. It's easier to change 20% of your large company 80% than it is to change 80% of your company 20%. I want you to think about this for a minute. When do you really change? Right? Really. Get a divorce, you go bankrupt, you lose your health, somebody close to you passes away. Why do you change? Because the risk of trying something radical and the reward of staying where you're at is reversed in a crisis. Every economist knows this. We've had 6 Nobel Prize winners since 1969 saying Joseph Schumpeter was right, not Keynes or Hayek. Forget the progressive conservative thing. What Schumpeter said is companies aren't killed by competitors, they kill themselves, right? Read Edmund Phelps' book, Mass Flourishing. It's a hard read, but you'll appreciate it, right? So the notion is, people change when they're in a serious crisis. Anybody remember what Apple was trading at in 97? Right? What was it trading at? $5.65. Front page of the Wall Street Journal, Apple is dead. What happens when you're almost dead? You take the safety off and you play a live round, or in the words of that new Nobel Prize winner, when you ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose. You got nothing to lose. Right? You start fighting back. So innovation moves from the outside in. Now, when's the other time companies change? You ever been on a roll? You ever been in love? You been in love before? Of course. Yeah. Married man? How long you married, Aaron? That's a good sign. A long time. Remember when you're first married, and she called you stud monkey or whatever, played the banjo or whatever you do down there, and tried that position 27. Oh, come on, we all did it. Not with your wife, Aaron, but we did it. All right. The point is, you try stuff when you're on a roll. You're John Chambers in 1997, you're Cisco, you're worth the same amount as the General Electric company, throwing sevens every time you're trying stuff. Now here's the point. Innovation doesn't come from the inside out, it comes from the outside in. Great movements, Gandhi, the March of the Sea. Horrible movements, Hitler and the brown shirts. Innovation doesn't move inside out, it moves outside in. So you've got to manage the outside or the tails of innovation, which leads us to our old Joe Schumpeter thing. Schumpeter basically wrote a book in the 1940s, 1943, and I won't spend a lot of time on Schumpeter. It was basically crazy. My mother's also Eastern European, hand-waving people, right? We're hand-waving people. You know, we're kind of excitable people, right? Deal people, right? And Schumpeter basically said, I'm putting my model on old Joe's model, he said companies grow, they start by being green. The urge to be free and superior. Then they become blue, they focus, then they become yellow, we got to get the right people, and then they become red. And Schumpeter has this famous line that's attributed to everybody, but it's an old Joe line actually. He says, the seeds of our undoing are sown at the pinnacle of our success. I'm sorry, I didn't invent that. That's an old Schumpeter line. And here's what Schumpeter meant. He meant that all these companies in the room, you're very successful. But at the very moment that you've succeeded, every person on the capital committee, every metric that you're running, every talent that you're hiring is designed to eliminate variation. We've seen the enemy, and he is us. And what Schumpeter says is companies will flatline. We have General Motors here in the crowd, I know that. Do you know in 1950, General Motors had 53% of the one-car market? Drip, drip, drip. That's what flatlining. That's what he meant. He said the best thing that can happen, he calls this the point of creative destruction, is you can start to fail fast and be Apple. And when you fail fast, what happens is the risk and reward profile reverses. You have to do something radical, otherwise you're not going to be safe. Now there's bad news and good news. The bad news is your corporations, because you're here, are doing well. The good news is some part of your corporation right now sucks. And that's where you want to go. Because the risk of you trying something is reversed where the organization is hurting. So the way to do this when you go home, look at the materials I've given you online and the assessment. You sit down with your team and treat it like a portfolio. Now, don't start with a portfolio what you start. Here's a radical proposition for you. What if the key to making innovation happen in an enterprise is not what you start? What if it's what you stop? What are you willing to give up to get what you want? Coming back from Miami the other day, this woman sitting next to me said, I'm writing a book. I'm on my ninth book, which I wrote with my wife. He said, or she said, I'm writing a book, I'm a lawyer. I said, oh, who's your publisher? She said, I don't have one yet. So, who are you sending your manuscript to? I don't have a manuscript yet. I said, okay, how far along are you? Well, I got it worked out in my mind. All right, you see where I'm going here, right? I said, well, what's stopping you? Well, I'm a Pilates teacher, and I volunteer at the Humane Society. And what am I thinking? How do you write a book? You get your sorry ass out of bed every morning, you drag yourself over to the computer, and you go, I suck, I don't know why anybody read anything I ever wrote. And you write a book. You do that every day for about a year and a half, and then you have 10 people tell you all things you're doing wrong, they correct it, and you have a book. That's how you write a book, right? You stop going to Pilates. Are you willing to stop going to Pilates? I mean, that's the question. So if you really want innovation, what are you willing to give up? If the answer is giving nothing up, you won't have it. Right? Once you give stuff up, what do you want to start? right? It's always the someday I'm going to write a book, someday I'm going to innovate, someday I'm going to go build a house, someday I'm going to move to France. Okay, whatever. Do it. And then finally, what are you going to hold? In conclusion, just a few things. Stop believing you can see the future. Make smaller, wider bets. Choosing big over fast. Pick up the pace. Stop mistaking your managers for innovators. Encourage and support your weirdos. The weirdos aren't just weird. I mean, if you're this kind of company is like a hardcore army guy in here, right? Red, nice red. Having more ambition and capability. Base your strategy on what you're capable of doing. Starting at the center, moving out, work from the outside in, listening to the wrong customers, follow the customers that move first. Stop benchmarking incumbents. They're the last people to leave a burning building. Failing to connect the dots. It's all about, for large companies, crossing boundaries. That's your advantage. I have a new book where I lay all this out, and there's a piece in here. If you do this, there's a MOOC I have in Michigan. I think it's 14 videos, and we've thrown that in with the book. Thanks for having me out. I've run a couple minutes over, but I'm willing to take some questions and comments. Let's push back. It's late in the afternoon, then we can all go drinking together. What do you got, boss?
That's time. Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Let's do this. Okay, so, questions? Who wants to rumble? Come on! Come on! Oh, we got some gunners here. Sitting in front, as always.
Hi. So, question is, are we in this, do we need to, we're about in the 9th year after the financial crisis, so probably the next will happen in a couple of years from now. Are we going to see more innovation coming out when there is a crisis?
Yes.
So okay.
Yeah, the answer is simple, which is what happened in 2007 is, one of the things, for example, we read recently is Amazon killed everybody in the retail space last Christmas. Well, half of the reason is, not half, I'm exaggerating, but a large amount of retail got carved out, got washed out. And what happens is, that when you have a course correction, two things happen. First, the industry consolidates, so it's not about innovation, it's about making it bigger. And the second is you start seeing the outlier. So here's the mistake people make. They always think it's technological. So what do the banks do? They build spread networks, right? Flash points, that sort of stuff. But what happened at the same time was Bitcoin, the other end, right? Bitcoin started, you know how it started? Money laundering. Innovation doesn't start in nice places. Where we're the streaming people, you know where streaming started, don't get me started on this. I'm going into all this. Gotta look in the dark places, it's hard to tell you. When you're asking me when the market will correct, I don't know, but if I'm looking at an American economy that's growing at 1.2%, and the stock market is growing at 14-15%, there's a problem. The issue is when does that problem come due, when's that note come due, how's that note come due? I don't know, talk to the accountants. Did I answer your question? Yeah. All right, someone else. What you got here?
We saw these 4 different kinds of innovators and how one color should engage with the diametrically opposite color. Have you seen examples where a single person can be both colors?
I have. One of the things that amazes me is occasionally you'll meet somebody who's highly ambidextrous. And one of my favorites, and I'm not trying to play up to the crowd here, I've been associated for years with Jeff Immelt, and I really like Jeff Immelt. And I think one of the amazing things, he's this charming, good-looking former quarterback. And you hate guys like this, right? Just, that he's still good-looking, and he's like a bazillion years old, right? And don't tell him I said that, not in case it's on tape, so maybe he'll hear. But anyway, but he's in a very blue company, and he's very yellow. And it's always impressed me how ambidextrous the man is. And I think when they write the book, my opinion, on General Electric, I think they're going to write about Jeff as well in as glowing terms as they wrote about Jack. And I think that what made Jeff special was range. And he surrounded himself with some very different people than Jack would have done. One of my favorite people at General Electric's an old friend, Beth Comstock, who's the Chief Innovation Officer. Very different kind of a person than you would have seen at General Electric maybe 20 years ago. So I think there are great examples of that, and I think there are a lot of startups. I think we're starting to see some at Microsoft. So it's a new day. We're starting to see more complete leaders. Someone else? They want to drink. That's what's going on here.
Hi. So you talked at the beginning about how innovation has a shelf life.
Yep.
Right? Have you ever seen anybody successfully harness unripe innovation? So maybe something that was thought up, but it wasn't quite ready. And have you seen anybody revisit that?
Yes, I want to tell you my favorite example. I'm going to embarrass myself here with my answer. I've been thrown out of 2 organizations in my life, and I've been in half the Fortune 500, so I've been in a lot of places. I was thrown out of McDonald's because I let them know that I thought they'd let Starbucks in and their coffee was terrible and that they're making people fat, and that had changed. I wasn't wrong. I should have been nicer about it. And I was thrown out of General Motors. The first gig I ever had General Motors, I was thrown out of. And one of the things that General Motors had was something called the Liebherr production engine. It was developed in 1972, the patent had elapsed. And the senior person on the team was a guy named Chuck Goulash, who left General Motors and went to Toyota. And they revisited something that they didn't have the manufacturability for. And they made an amazing car out of it, and they completely changed the market around it. So the notion is, yes, it's a very good idea to revisit history, because a lot of good answers are in history. Here's my favorite one, Uber. Where's the innovation in Uber? Right? Oh, it's the business model. Really? We used to call that the church group. You called the church groups. I need to ride somewhere. Hey, can you tell the pastor I need to ride? Right? And the app. Is the Uber app really a game changer? Is it something that, a dozen 25-year-olds at any good university couldn't develop? What's the innovation about Uber is that you'll get in the car with a stranger. Right? It's like the Airbnb. If someone said, Jeff, someone's coming to your house, they're going to use your tile. Take it in the backyard and burn it. Stick the dogs on it. Right? That's what I do. So some innovations are less about the new technology and more about, is society ready for something different? And some innovations are about, this was a good idea, we just didn't have the capability of making it before.
My question is a little bit of a segue to what you just said. In this time where change is constant and we are coming off of so much uncertainty, what kind of personality type is more predisposed to take advantage of this situation?
All of them. I'm not trying to be glib here. I'm trying to say in highly ambiguous situations, we know that greens are more adaptive, right? They're more divergent thinkers, but their ability to get any real traction on anything, to get to scale on anything is very small. Or on the other hand, reds look at underlying technology trends and technology roadmaps, and they may be able to help these greens realize that vision. And this is something they were talking about the teams. He was breaking up the teams at Microsoft, and Aaron is exactly right about that. That the notion is, you may in this period have more greens, but they're going to be highly disenfranchised and disaggregated if they can't get some reds and blues under their feet in particular. We got a comment back here, and then I think we're probably going to get close to time here. Got to throw the ball. He's a Canadian and he can catch. How about that?
I can catch.
You got your glove hand up there. The stick, the other one.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't go all the way. But good luck, National. Do you have an example of an organization that applied this to make a transition? Applied this concept to actually make a transition?
Well, there's 2 groups in the room here that I've worked with their CEOs pretty extensively. One is Bosch, the sponsor here. And you're running a process that came out of a collaboration with my lab, and the other is General Electric. So when Alec Baldwin was on 30 Rock and making fun of Liz Lemon because he had all of his blue, I mean, he's making fun of me, is what he's doing, about all this. And it's funny because GE runs all these other things now. They have a million things now. But back when Jeff came in, that this was a simple way of trying to get people to think on the same page. Remember, organizations get tied down by too much process. What you really want are people who are thinking in a simpatico way, shared vision, and shared language. And that's what this did. So I probably spent 3 years, probably every week at General Electric for the first 3 years of Jeff's years here. And eventually, of course, what happens, which is good, is then you leave it. You don't need it anymore. Then you start building other things, which is what you need to do. Did I answer your question?
That's
All right, we're done, I assume. Now what?